Welcome to the Sermon B-Side Podcast, a podcast of Liberti Church in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. Sermon B-Side is designed to be a resource to answer your questions and to go deeper into the conversation started by each week's sermon.
Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Liberti B-Side Podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Wright, and today I'm joined virtually by the one, the only Matt Laloyan. Matt, how are you doing on this fine Monday morning?
You know, it really is a fine Monday morning from the mountains of North Carolina, where I am at the moment. The sun came up over the mountains a little while ago, so it's a pretty idyllic setting. So sad to not be in person recording with you, but not sad about my surroundings at the moment.
Just rub it in, why don't you? You know, to all of us over here in Pennsylvania still. But anyway. Matt, yesterday you continued on in our sermon series on 2 Corinthians. You finished out the first chapter talking about integrity. And so why don't you, from the beautiful, illustrious mountains of North Carolina, tell us what you preached on yesterday?
Yeah, so Paul shifts gears a little bit in the second half of this first chapter. Last week we talked a lot about comfort and affliction, and that's a theme, of course, that we'll come back to several times in this letter. But in the second half of that first chapter, he starts talking about his integrity, and that's been called into question specifically because of a change of plans. He had said he was going to visit the Corinthians 2 more times, and he ended up only visiting them 1 more time. And so they immediately took that as proof that he was unreliable and that he could no longer be trusted, that he was duplicitous, that he was just like any other fleshly, worldly kind of leader that just is expedient and does whatever they need to serve their own interests. So Paul undertakes a defense of his own integrity, and he does it in a couple different ways. He talks about his actual motives. He talks about his integrity, but then he actually points to God's integrity and Paul's uniqueness, especially as a capital A apostle, the message and the messenger being so closely equated. It was really important for Paul to defend his integrity there, because for the Corinthians, many of whom heard the gospel for the first time from Paul, if Paul is unreliable, it'd be very easy for them to make the connection that maybe God's unreliable too. And so he's defending not only his own integrity, but God's integrity. So in the middle part of yesterday's text, we talked about God's integrity, the incredible passage, 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 20, if all the promises of God find their yes in Jesus. And then out of that, Paul talks about how really his role as a leader among them is meant to serve their joy and their steadfastness. And implied in that is that there's an important role that the Corinthians themselves have to play in the communal pursuit of integrity. So those are the 3 main points yesterday: Paul's integrity, God's integrity, and our integrity.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of framed that discussion or that sermon yesterday in kind of how this is really exposing in our own context as well, where we live in a moment in a time where we either trust ourselves or trust no one, and we have no institutional belief or belief that leaders can be good, and how it's a really timely opportunity to address our hearts right here in Central PA. So as we think about that, and we think about being in Bible studies this week, our second week of Bible studies being back in full swing, when you're looking at our Bible study sermon application questions, Matt, where would you like, as our pastor, for us to lean in this week in Bible studies?
Yeah, I think it's really a great moment to talk about that real tension and that struggle, both of our own integrity, but also the communal side and how we need to trust one another in a Christian community as brothers and sisters, and trust leaders that God's put in place. So I think that would be a great, in terms of the application piece, to go. I really think that there's a lot of gift to be found in saturating yourself in the promises of God that find their fulfillment in Jesus. So it would not be a bad use of your Bible study time to live in some of those Old Testament passages that then find their fulfillment in Jesus. Or even, a book like Hebrews is a great place if you want to add into some additional supplemental text to your study this week, where a lot of those fulfillments are revealed in very clear ways. The author of Hebrews just constantly is pointing to the promise and fulfillment over and over again. So that saturation of God's faithfulness, and ultimately, the only reason we would even attempt to trust each other in human relationships is because we have a higher trust in God, who has designed in His good world, who designed us for community and designed us to be in mutual relationships with each other, and also in certain contexts, in relationships where there's leaders. So that would also be a great place to spend a lot of Bible study time this week.
Yeah, I had one follow-up question about kind of like your big practical application points from yesterday of telling the truth, assuming the best, and curiosity before condemnation. I think my question for our Bible studies is how do they know if they're doing these things, especially the second one, assuming the best. I think that one could be a little more nebulous. So do you have any framework or thoughts about how someone can know if they're in a scenario where they have an opportunity, they're faced with something where there's a leader or someone in community with them that they feel like their integrity is in question, or maybe there's like a change of plans happens. How do we know if in community we're actually assuming the best? Are there any markers that we can look for that?
Yeah, in community, sometimes it comes out just in little passing phrases. Like where someone might be like, how that person is, or like there might be little markers that come out, and in a community, we can help each other by saying, I'm not sure I do know if that's how that person is. At least just not kind of the group think mob mentality of kind of piling on of like, that person really is kind of like that, and I don't like how they did this, and that a lot of that happens in kind of, at least as my own experience and my own, when I've not assumed the best, it's happened very internally. It's an internal monologue. And if you find yourself internally playing out hypothetical conversations that haven't actually happened and how they might go, that's a pretty good sign that you're struggling to assume the best, especially if as you're playing out those hypotheticals, you're finding yourself either defending yourself or having to be ready for things that you think that other person's going to say. That would be a sign that your own internal story and narrative about how another person is, what they're like, is already being built, quite a bit. So it happens a lot internally, but then it'll find its way out externally in conversations with people that you're comfortable with. So that's where the communal side can come in.
Yeah, and that's helpful. I mean, I think pulling back when you're in those moments and saying, how much of what I am spiraling over is real? And if there's doubt in your soul, pursuing the conversation, telling the truth. I think assuming the best, telling the truth, they really do fit together and work together. And a lot of other places in Paul, I think we see those thoughts being wedded together with like preserving of unity and building up the church. So I think that's really helpful for Bible studies this week. So as we kind of transition then from Bible studies into B-side questions, we've got a couple questions for this week. So this person, their first question, Matt, we'll just bounce right through these. They're asking if your spouse, and I think maybe if anyone asks you a direct question, should you give a direct answer? What does balancing truth and love, balancing, they said bouncing, but I think they meant balancing, truth and love look like?
Bouncing truth, when I saw that, I was like, I don't, maybe that's what the kids are saying these days. But I don't know what bouncing truth is. You have to explain that.
I think they meant balancing.
I think balancing. Yeah. That sounds right. If someone or spouse in particular asks a direct question, should you give a direct answer? I think yes. I'm not sure if there's a specific kind of depth in mind. I think there's, we don't want to be untruthful with each other. So we should try to be direct. There's an important, and maybe that's the second part of the question of balancing truth and love. Direct can be perceived as harsh. Direct can be harsh, even in your motives. So there's a way to be direct and honest, but also loving and caring. And so I'm thinking maybe because it's this person said, like, if a spouse asks you a direct question, like a spouse might be asking about an outfit or their weight or all kinds of things, where like you gotta treat them very carefully in that moment because it's a vulnerable thing. So to be direct and say, like, no, that outfit is ugly, but like that's direct, but it's not loving. So if they ask you a direct question, I think you can say, no, that actually isn't the best outfit that I've seen on you. I think there's other outfits that are more flattering, or you can find a way to say it directly, but to be caring in that same moment.
Yeah, and I think that obviously gets a little bit more difficult when it comes down to, like, hey, did I upset you or did I hurt you? And especially with a spouse and community, that's where those lines of truth and love get really hard. But I think in general, the being honest when we're actually hurt, or when something in community actually affects us, is really important in our paradigm of being able to apply those things that you challenged us to do yesterday from 2 Corinthians. So, so that's that first question. Our second question is a big one, and you kind of alluded to this being one of the main questions that you guys get, the elders of our church get in our In Covenant process, in our Liberty 101s. And it's the question of what do we do with church leaders making decisions, right? And so, you touched on the accountability piece, but this is kind of the internal, what does a church member do when leaders make a decision that we may disagree with? So the question is, if church leaders make a decision that members don't agree with, what does making peace with that decision look like? Mm-hmm. What does healthy conflict look like? And how do we stop disunity and gossip? So I think this disunity and gossip is specifically in context of if a church leader makes a decision that you might disagree with. So let's live there with this one, Matt.
Yeah, and I love how this person worded this question, because they said, what does making peace with that decision look like? So that's an important distinction between peacekeeping and peacemaking. Peacekeeping is just saying whatever, kind of being apathetic about it, sweeping it under the rug, or pretending that you're okay with it if it really is bothering you. I mean, sometimes you can move past it, because there's a lot of decisions that get made by church leaders. There's a lot of daily decisions about different things. There's we just did a reno project, so there's colors on the wall that someone might go, I don't like the color of this, whatever. And hopefully,
too bad.
Jenna will give you a direct answer for that direct question if you ask her.
If the paint's already in the wall, guys.
But decisions, hopefully many decisions you can kind of do your own triage with and say, how consequential is this? How important is this? And in many spaces say, okay, well, this is the realm where they've got to make a call. Somebody's got to make a call. They're the ones in the seat to make a call. Let's just go with it. It's not a big deal. And truly, you can make peace by just letting it go. But in those things that keep lingering, that keep bothering you, which tend to be more directional decisions about where a church is going, theological or philosophy of ministry questions. Those are ones that, when they keep kind of bugging you, making peace and not creating disunity and gossip would look like going to the person or people most directly responsible for that decision, and like we talked about yesterday, starting with a question, not coming in hot with like, how dare you do this? How could you possibly think that this was a good idea? That's the condemnation kind of accusation side of it. But to come in with a question of, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me understand?
Yeah.
And you'll probably catch me or other church leaders on bad days sometimes where we don't respond graciously as we should in the moment. But the response that we should have, that I should have, or any of or you or any other church leader should have, would be a gracious one of saying, thanks for bringing that to me. Yeah, I'm glad to find some time to talk through that. I can help you understand, who was involved in that decision, how we got there, a little bit of the process, and at least would create understanding. I think one of the big things here is if to calibrate your expectations going in, that there can't be unanimity about everything. Uh, and and as much as there's a mutuality in brothers and sisters in Jesus, there's not a unanimity in the way that the church is led, and that there are people given to the church that end up sitting in certain leadership roles, servant leadership roles,
Yep.
that are tasked with making certain decisions. So that it's actually not, the church is not meant to be led by democratic vote. It's a different leadership paradigm than ones that maybe we think would work the best in our human institutions. And that's not to say that there's not accountability, that there's not input, that there's not voice given. There's a lot of qualifiers I could give here, but to have the expectation of, well, as a member of the church, it's my call. It's going to go my way, or it's always going to be a democratic kind of 50% plus vote. That would be the wrong expectation to go in. So I think that's just an important calibration to have too, and say there's disproportionate disproportionate responsibility given to those who have that disproportionate authority, who therefore should also take the prerogative disproportionately to make certain calls, even if not everybody's on board with it.
Right.
So that's part of the paradigm too.
I also think there's a proactive way to go about it. So, for example, in Liberti's paradigm, when someone has gone through the elder development process and you put them up before the congregation to say, hey, we're recommending this person, you've got a certain amount of days. If you have any concerns or questions, come our way. And I think it actually requires, whether it's that decision, whether it's, the bylaws vote that we just had about adding a new distinction of deacon and elder emeritus. I think there's a head of the game, like, hey, if you actually have a distress in your soul about that and you have a question, you actually have to go ask the question, right? And I guess from your seat as a pastor of this church, Matt, do you guys appreciate that? Like, do you appreciate when people actually, obviously it would be a bummer in like an elder situation where something comes out and that you haven't seen, and that would suck. But isn't that exactly what you would want on the proactive side of this? I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to go to someone in a leadership position and say, hey, I disagree with you about that. Depending on how your past experiences have gone with people that have been in leadership roles in places that you've been in or churches that you've been in, that can be terrifying. And so some people are just like, it's not worth, sticking my hand in the hornet's nest. So people don't do it. And the sad part about that is then it's, it tends to be, and Jenny, you know this just as well as I do, it tends to be that when you don't hear anything from anybody, the baseline assumption is like, I guess people are at least okay with this, and on board with it. We don't wait for, we don't hold our breath like every Monday to get like lots of encouragement for all the stuff that's going great or the stuff that people are excited about. We're more like, kind of like flinch when we open our email for the first time on Monday, like, okay, did we do anything that like really made somebody upset yesterday? So, but having said that, finding gracious ways to bring up the concerns that you do have is really helpful to us, because even though we don't want to, like leaders in the church want to actually lead. They want to, before the face of God, giving an account for the people of God. We want to, carve out a path for people to follow that's faithful. But we don't want to do that in an echo chamber. We don't want to do that blind. We don't want to do that pretending that we don't miss things sometimes or haven't considered something deeply enough sometimes. So all of the input that we get proactively as those things are coming up is really helpful. Just saying again, to emphasize that point, if you can come in asking a question, it will help the average person. Like, it will help me. It will help the average church leader really respond better to that than they will if you come in with an accusation or a condemnation.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think sometimes we only think about the how do I make peace side of it and not the proactive side of it in our context. sometimes. So,
Yeah.
so let's transition to our last question. So this last question is in that vein of integrity, because your last point yesterday was that we have an obligation to aspire to communal integrity because of the integrity of God, all these things working out in us. And so this person is just asking simply, how do you actually recognize and encourage integrity? So I mean, I guess that's my first. I'll ask that first, and then I'll ask their follow-up question. So, how do we actually go about recognizing integrity in one another?
One of the best ways is people following through on their commitments. So integrity has a lot to do with telling the truth with your words, being direct, in a loving
Yeah.
way, truth and love together.
Yep.
But the integrity, like a person with integrity, it carries out into the different aspects of their life. So the difficult part about judging it just by the way someone talks about something is that if you have a verbal processor will talk through an issue and will give you an answer. But if you zoom out from that, you might experience it as them just talking around something and not actually saying something directly. So if someone's verbal processing and you're like, I'm looking for a direct answer, you might perceive that to be a person that doesn't have integrity. You might look at that and say, this is just a politician. This is just someone that's just like saying a lot of words without saying actually anything. And so I think you got to be careful with the criteria you use to judge it just based on conversational interaction.
Yeah.
Now, if you kind of in a conversation keep drilling down on something and say, okay, can you just tell me then maybe more succinctly, is it a yes or is it a no? Then that's a great way conversationally. But the other way would be in just all of life. Does this person follow through on their commitments? Is this person the same in the different environments that they're in? If you're perceiving them in their, in your Bible study group one way, and then when you hang out with them outside of that in a different setting and they're a totally different person, that's also an integrity issue. That means that there is, even if it's not an intentionally cultivated thing, that there's a measure of double-mindedness or duplicity kind of in there somewhere. And so I think those are other evidences that you see just how this people work out their own life and faith and the way that plays out across different spheres.
Yeah. You mentioned the keeping commitments point. I think on the other side of that, integrity is also seen when you observe how someone behaves when they fail.
Yes.
Are they, are they taking ownership? Are they taking responsibility? Are they pursuing repentance? Are they, are they owning up to that failure or mistake that they make? And I think you can also see and observe in that way. So I guess this person is also asking a follow-up question. So failure is maybe a good example, but can integrity only be tested in hard moments? So I'm thinking right now specifically about affliction in 2 Corinthians. So we've got a lot of folks in our church experiencing really hard things right now. What layer does affliction have in us, like seeing integrity in our community?
Yeah, to your point, Jenna, I think what you said before is spot on too. The integrity is not perfection. So when there's failure, when imperfection is there, owning that and repenting of it is actually a way. And I hope we receive it as that. I receive it as that. When someone owns something and apologizes and tries to do it differently the next time, that actually increases my perception of their integrity, not diminishes it. And I think that's spot on. And so I think the hard moments of life reveal what has been built and formed over the small moments of life in this. So I don't think that, like, if an incredible trial comes upon you and you've been a person of zero integrity up to that moment, but apart from the miraculous work of the Holy Spirit, there's not just going to be this incredible, wow, I've got integrity now. Look at this integrity. Yeah. Often what will happen in that moment is there'll be a big exposure of, oh my gosh, I'm different people in different places. I heard this line recently. I think it was it's a guy that's like a psychologist, but I think he did like hostage negotiation or something like that. I heard this quote that said, "Nobody, um, nobody rises to the moment. Everybody lowers to the point of preparation." So there's not like a magical moment that, okay, now I'm a person of integrity. It's preparation. It's the day in, day out integrity stuff. Are we truthful people day in and day out?
Yeah.
Can we be trustworthy in our friendships, in our family relationships, in our church, in our regular relationships? Are we the same person in these different settings? All these different things that we might look at as integrity, those are being formed in 1,000 micro moments and decisions day in and day out, that when the hard moments come, it reveals the gold that's been
Yeah.
formed there over a long time.
So in that vein, just for maybe someone that might be feeling like they lack integrity, maybe they are different people in different spaces, or struggling to follow through with commitments, or perhaps they just don't understand their limitations, so they overcommit. What from your pastoral perspective is a way that we can recalibrate that and pursue integrity, where whether you're like really, really dependable and, regimented, and, what are the ditches that we should avoid, and how do we pursue it together, Matt?
Yeah, that's really good. I think this week will lend itself to some evaluation of our own integrity as we're in these Bible
Yep.
study groups and talking about this. And that's part of the communal pursuit, is right, remembering that that we are, at some point or another in our lives, we are unfaithful, and it's God's faithfulness that we really are relying on, and that
Yep.
we're already exposed in the fact that we're not perfect people, and that there's moments in our lives where we don't act with integrity or follow through in integrity. So if we can come into our Bible study groups, we come into community relationships with that baseline, that level playing field, that
Mm.
will already allow us to then be. The hard part is when we don't come in that way, now we've put in a subconscious, or maybe very overt, pressure on each other to keep lying, to keep pretending
Yep.
that they actually have it more
Yep.
together than they are. And that's
Yep.
part of this communal pursuit, right? Part of the communal pursuit of integrity is making it possible for people to apologize for not having integrity, making it a level playing field, that we're going to mess up on this front. It's so counterintuitive, but we end up shooting ourselves in the foot when we have kind of this perfection bar set, and
Right.
then people keep doubling down on not having integrity. So I don't know if that got to your question exactly there, but I think that's a baseline of, we know we're not going to do this perfectly. We know we're going to have to own up. And if you're someone that struggles with integrity, starting there with, hey, where have you maybe lacked integrity in your life, and how can you acknowledge that, apologize where you need to, and ask for, some accountability on that. That would be
Yep.
a great starting point.
Yeah, that's helpful. So that was your sermon from yesterday. We talked through Bible studies this week, and we concluded with listener questions. Any final thoughts from the first chapter of 2 Corinthians, Matt, for the people at home?
Nothing that jumps to mind immediately. I hope you really are encouraged by the content of 2 Corinthians. Like all of Paul's letters, like, he doesn't waste a whole lot of time with fluff.
No.
Even his greeting is packed full of stuff, but then he dives right into some pretty intense topics like comfort and affliction and integrity. Things that
Yep.
I think all of us are aware of the magnitude of the importance of right now in this moment. So hopefully it's encouraging to you to have the Word of God in its timeless way be so applicable in a timely way to where we're at right now. And the hope will be that we just keep mining the riches of what's there over the weeks to come.
Yeah, that's helpful, man. So, well, from this stuffy office, I hope that you have a fun rest of your time in North Carolina. For the folks at home, thanks for listening. Keep sending in those questions for us. We really appreciate when it's not just me coming up with follow-up questions to put Pastor Matt in the hot seat on. So we love to know what your questions are as you're processing through 2 Corinthians and the timely way it is, a double-edged sword, right?
Mm.
It's exposing but encouraging at the same
that's right.
time. And so, we need your questions, and we appreciate you guys. If we have nothing else, we will see you again next week on another episode of the B-Side Podcast.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Sermon B-Side Podcast. For more resources and information about our church, visit www.libertycamphill.org. That's Liberty with an I, camphill.org.